Please sit down, Dr. Glover. Yes, Mr. Skinner.
Thanks, sir. Dr. Glover, thank you very much for coming back. We were discussing wire MJS1 before the break. Can we return to that, and in particular refer to a photo MET quadruple 0 9077? Now, can you just confirm for us what this photograph shows?
This is the remains of the compressor from the fridge freezer in flat 16, and on the front view, this would actually be the left side of the compressor if you were behind the fridge looking at it. But you're looking at the compressor relay compartment, the remains of it and components within it.
Okay. And as we're looking at it, is the wire on the left 6C? Are you able to confirm?
I cannot answer that. Again, I was not present during when the compressor components were still affixed to the compressor. I only saw them in separate bags, so I cannot tell you which is 6B or 6C. I don't have a scale to measure things there, so I could try to do an analysis in the future, but I can't identify which is 6B, which is 6C, or
okay, understood. Now, if the one on the left is 6C for the purposes of a hypothesis, would the arc damage part of MJS1 need to be located at the end of 6C? It's a hypothetical question, given your previous answer.
Question. Well, 6C is approximately 7 centimeters in length. And could you repeat that question?
Yes, of course. It's on the hypothesis
Yes.
that the wire on the left is 6C.
Okay.
Would the arc damage part of MJS1 be located after the end of 6C?
Yes, it would.
Can I ask you to turn back to your addendum and figure 7, which is at page 13? Now, the path of the short circuit is illustrated with the red zigzag in the bottom right-hand corner, I think. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And are the wires that participate in the short circuit that you say was caused by the overheated crimp located inside the compressor relay or not?
Yes.
Yes.
They were located inside the compressor relay compartment. Yes.
And looking at figure 7 itself, where would you place MJS1?
Considering the number of wire strands in MJS1, 24 strands per wire, okay, which is consistent with the run capacitor wires. Here you have the run capacitor, okay? Here's one run capacitor wire here, another one here. Now, these look like short sections to you. Remember that the run capacitor is not within the relay compartment. It's over here. Yeah. Okay? So you pull this run capacitor out and bring these two wires, here's one, here's two, both of which, and here's a continuation of it. Bring these two wires out and then bring them into the compressor compartment and then hook them up to these two locations.
Nice.
Is that?
Can you help me with that? To an extent, apologies, this may be me, but you've got the path of the short circuit shown by means of the zigzag on the left-hand side.
Yes.
If you place MJS1 in or near the run capacitor, which is what I understood you were saying,
yes.
Why is the path of the short circuit not near the run capacitor?
Well, again, this is just a circuit diagram.
Okay.
These two wires, the run capacitor wires, extend out. So even though I'm showing the short circuit here, if I could run this over here, I'm just trying to illustrate here a short circuit that bypasses the clicks-on overload relay in the compressor itself. Now, again, these two wires for the run capacitor are running out of the relay compartment. So if you wanted to, I could bring this over here, okay, and you get the same effect.
I understand. Could I now deal with the fire initiation scenario itself? And looking at the mechanism of overheating, what testing have you done to ascertain the electric current that flows through 6B Bravo when the fridge freezer is running normally?
That would be the load, the compressor load. Now, we'll start with the power supply cord for the fridge freezer. It has a 13 ampere fuse on it. So we're talking about a normal load current for the entire fridge freezer of, let's say, 10 amperes, just to give you a rough number, approximately. Now, when the compressor is on, okay, I would estimate that, and it's my estimate of in the range of 5 to 10 amperes for the compressor load current under normal conditions. Okay. When it starts up, it's much higher. A compressor motor, when it starts, could be 5 or 6 times that. But after it gets into the normal running current, I would estimate the compressor load current in the range of 5 to 10 amperes.
Were you able to measure the post-fire electrical resistance of the connection within 6B for Bravo?
No, I did not do that.
Would that be possible?
Well, you could certainly pull out a device, an electronic meter, to try and measure resistance, but how meaningful that would be, I would question. You have a connector that has gone through a fire. It's heavily fire damaged, and then after the fire, it was exposed to moisture and the possibility of additional corrosion, rust. So in my opinion, that would be, it certainly could be tried, but I wouldn't find that too meaningful of a measurement.
Thank you. Turning now to the wire crimp, and just understanding its basic design, does it include internal serrations?
On the barrel of the crimp?
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them serrations, I'd call them ribs, perhaps.
And these are used to clamp the wire strands together in the electrical connector, just to understand.
Excuse me?
The basic crimp design has serrations, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the purpose of those serrations is to clamp the wire strands together in the connector.
Yes, and clamp them to the barrel, the wire barrel itself.
Yeah. And looking at 6A and 6B, are they two different crimp designs?
Do you think we should see them?
Yes, I'm just having said that, now trying to remember what the reference would be, but
yeah.
It may well be that you don't need it just to deal with 6A and 6B.
The only difference, 6B, as I mentioned, has 14 plus 23, that's 37 wire strands in it. 6A has 24 strands. So whether they're the identical connectors, I can't answer that. They look very similar in design, but they may have different model numbers in order to accommodate different size wire strands, but they are similar in design.
Oh, if we go back in your addendum at page 6, does this provide any help? It may not, actually. To illustrate the point you've made.
Again, they look very similar. However, I would have to do a dimensional analysis, perhaps even look, I don't know if you could find some model numbers on the remains of these crimps. They're very, very similar, but I can't say they're identical, of the identical model.
Now, staying with this page and looking in particular at the figure 2, the top suite of pictures, is it fair to say there are multiple points where the wires in 6B are tightly clamped? Just looking at what we see in those cross-sectional slices there.
Okay, so we're looking within the wire barrel itself.
Yes.
and now we have to look at cross-sections.
Yeah.
So, and that's where we're looking about the clamping. My opinion, looking at the shape of the connector, not projecting, not the curved portion of the barrel projecting inwards, also looking at this space which is wide over here and then narrows down.
And just stopping there, the space you're referring to there again is the space we were referring to earlier on, the space between the two wire barrels illustrated at the top of figure
Yes.
2.
Yes. So I don't consider this a tight connection. So now what was your question exactly?
Well, the question is really, are there multiple points illustrated by these cross-sectional slides where the wires are tightly clamped? Is that a proposition you'd accept or not?
I would not use the word tightly clamped. There are locations where wire strands are in contact with each other, and there are other locations where there are void spaces. I would not consider this a tight clamp. I would not consider any of these a tight clamp because of the lack of the curvature portion of this barrel projecting more into the strands, which you can compare with the lower figure for 3A.
And going back to the top of figure 2, looking at the wire barrel itself, there appear to be, looking at the top wire, 2 or possibly 3 ribs. Is that a correct reading of that?
There are rib sections, yes.
Now, are you able to say whether there's a correlation between the location of the ribs and the location of the voids illustrated in the cross-sectional slices below?
Well, considering that there are 80 slices here that the CT scan gave us, and there are voids in every slice, you're going to have some slices in between ribs, some slices under ribs, both of which have voids. So I'd say there's no correlation there. However, I would say that the slices that have large voids, such as this center one, are likely correlated with the ribs.
And to some extent, can we draw any reassurance from the fact if we're looking at the center cross-sectional slice,
Yes.
there's a green line, an arrow immediately above it. If we follow the line up, does that reach a rib in the lowest wire barrel?
It does. Now, I have to be careful here. I selected a cross-section more or less in the middle of the wire barrel, and then I drew a line from what I considered to be the middle of the wire barrel down to this. I can't say that that is aligned with a rib. So even though I'm showing it like that, I did not specifically say, yes, this came from that rib. This cross-section came from more or less the center of the barrel. This cross-section came from the left end. This cross-section came from the right end. So when I drew this, I was not thinking of ribs. I was just picking 5 cross-sections that were broadly scan the entire length of the barrel.
Understood. Now, can I turn to the hypothesis on the fire spread, the initial fire spread, insofar as it concerned MJS1? Now, is it a correct assumption that the scenario you've set out in the addendum report is based upon the fire starting within the relay compartment?
Of the fridge freezer, yes.
Yes. Now, if MJS1 was located outside the relay compressor, how did overheating in JDG6B cause arcing on MJS1?
Did you say the fused section of MJS1 is located outside the relay compartment?
No, simply if MJS1 was located. I put it more generally than that.
The important part is the fused section of MJS1. I'm sure that, again, I have concluded that MJS1 was associated with this fridge freezer and ran into the relay compartment, but certain part of that 10 centimeters must have projected outside of the relay compartment heading towards the run capacitor.
And can you help us with how the fire would have travelled from within to without the compartment?
before the short circuit or
Yes,
after the short?
before, first of all.
So you're placing, I just want to get your premise. You're assuming that the fused section is outside of the relay
No,
compartment?
if we assume it's within,
Well, then you don't need, the fire doesn't need to travel outside.
Okay.
The fused section is within the relay compartment, and that's my opinion, that's my conclusion. And the line to neutral short circuit that gives you the arc damage to MJS1 is all within the relay compartment.
now, in relation to the scenario you've postulated in the addendum report, are you able to identify which two wires touch each other in the short circuit that you've set out and illustrated in Figure 7?
Yeah, well, one of them had to be an energized wire.
Yep.
That would be JDG 6B or an extension. Remember, we've only got about 7 centimeters of it, and then it ends. So you could think of the end of that 6B, Bravo, bridging across the run capacitor wires and causing a line to neutral short circuit.
Okay. Now, this may follow from a question I asked before lunch, but are you able to assist us with what you think came first? Was it the short circuit or the overheating connector?
The overheating connector, in my opinion, was the first event that started burning the insulation on the wires that led to a short circuit.
Now, if that's so, would the full path of the current through that connector during normal operations, would it operate at about a maximum of 0.4 amps or thereabouts?
0.4 amperes?
Yes.
I don't know where you got that number. Maybe I don't understand the question. Repeat that?
Yes, of course. If you say, which you do, that the overheating connector came first, do you accept that the full path of the current through that connector during normal operations would be at a maximum of 0.4 amps?
No.
Could you give a reason why you don't
Okay.
accept that?
Well, it just, we need to know what the compressor load is. And I have not calculated that, but I'm assuming that it's more than that.
Okay. Now, would you agree with the proposition that there were additional wires in the exemplar compressor relay compartment that you reviewed compared to the flat 16 fridge freezer? I think by way of example, do you agree that there was a jumper relay system in the exemplar but not in the flat 16 fridge freezer?
Okay, I think I understand your question, but if you could repeat that one more time.
Yes, of course. Do you agree with the proposition that there were additional wires in the exemplar compressor relay compartment compared to the flat 16 fridge freezer? And by way of example, there was a jumper relay system in the exemplar, but not in the flat 16 fridge freezer.
Yes, that's a possibility. The exemplar exact design and manufacture may have some differences, including, as you say, I observed some small jumper wires, it's in one of my figures in the report, within the relay compartment of the exemplar fridge freezer, which may not be associated, they may not have those jumper wires within the subject fridge freezer.
And would that difference have any material impact on the reasoning you set out in your addendum on the hypothetical fire initiation?
No, sir.
And can you help us why not?
Because I am associating the short circuit with 6B, which has, that has 23 strands and 14 strands in it, and that would have been energized when the compressor is on, and that's where the overheating crimp is, and that is what would have arced to the run capacitor wires.
Thank you. And are you able to say whether the length of the wires in the flat 16 fridge freezer were longer or shorter than the wiring in the exemplar?
We have to take the wires one at a time. Let's talk about the run capacitor wires. The run capacitor is not within the relay compartment. If you're behind the refrigerator, it's over to the left. And the run capacitor, as I understand it, would be a separate component, not necessarily supplied by the compressor manufacturer. That would be what the company that manufactured the fridge freezer would be connecting within the relay compartment, I would assume that the run capacitor wires would be similar for an Exemplar, or whether it be an Embraco or Tecumseh.
If they were shorter, for example, in the flat 16 fridge freezer, would that have any material impact on the reasoning you set out in the addendum?
No, but again, they can't be shorter. They have to, I know where the run capacitor is, on the left end of the mounting plate for the compressor. It's off to the left if you're behind. And then these wires run from the run capacitor to the relay compartment. They have to be a similar length, whether it be a Tecumseh or an Embraco.
Dr. Glover, thank you. I now come on to my final topic, which I'll deal with briefly. Now, given your experience of electrical fires in the United States, can you help us with what protective measures are fixed the back of domestic fridges so as to contain fire?
Yes, this is an area that I did not address in my report, but the one difference that I've seen is in the United States, the back casing, the rear casing of refrigerators are required by underwriters' laboratory standards to be manufactured of a metallic steel, let's say steel, not plastic. Whereas here in the UK and I think in Europe also, that you are allowed to manufacture refrigerators with a back casing that is plastic.
Are you able, on the basis of your experience, to give us any assistance to how effective the metal casing is in America to containing fires that start within a fridge?
Just in a general view, again, you're starting to get outside of my area of expertise. I'm an electrical guy, but you can imagine a fire starting within a refrigerator and with a steel backing. Now that backing does not span the entire length of the refrigerator. There is an open space down below where the compressor is located, but that steel backing would help to contain an internal fire, keep it within the refrigerator for a longer time, and also prevent, and you have less combustible now. Instead of a plastic casing on the rear which is combustible contributing to the fire, you now have a steel casing that is not. But that's just, so in a layman's terms, again, because I'm not a cause and origin person.
Dr. Glover, I'm very grateful for your assistance. Sir, may I ask for the usual 5 minutes or so, just to see if there are any points which I ought to have covered?
Yes, well, we usually have a little break at this point. Counsel thinks he's run out of ammunition, but he needs to just check that that's the case. So we'll have just over 5 minute break.
Okay.
And please don't talk to anyone, of course, about your evidence when you're out of the room. And if you'd like to go with the usher, we'll come back at 25 to 3.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Right, 25 to 3, please.
Thanks, sir.
Right. Well, I haven't asked Mr. Kinnear whether he's got any more questions, but I'd be surprised if he didn't have one or two. So should we just see? Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Well, so there are two unique events which have happened today. One, we finished before 5, and the second unique event is that there are no supplemental questions.
No supplemental questions. That must be a first.
So it leaves me simply to say, Dr. Glover, thank you very much for attending today to give evidence. It's been very helpful indeed.
Yeah. And Dr. Glover, can I thank you, please, on behalf of the inquiry as a whole? I found your evidence really interesting and very useful. And if I may say so, very clearly put. And thank you for giving us the benefit of your expertise. And we're very grateful to you. Thank you.
My pleasure, sir.
Well, thank you very much indeed. So that's it. So if you'd like to go with the usher, she'll look after you. And we can bring those out for you later on, don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So there are two final points before we rise today. The first one of which is to thank Mr. Penfold, who has been the documents director for a significant chunk of the inquiry. This is his last day assisting today. So if I may, on behalf of the entire CTI team, pass on our thanks to him. His patience has been exemplary, I think.
Well, I think we all owe him a great debt of gratitude. Thank you very much indeed.
And so the final matter is that concludes the evidence today.
Right,
and we have Professor Nick Dade at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Good. Thank you very much. Well,
Thanks, sir.
we all get an early afternoon, but I'm sure you can make good use of it. We'll break now and resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow with our next witness. Good. Thank you very much.